Hi, it's Alexander Russo from The Grade. This is the Education Show, and I'm delighted to be here with Mike Reilley of Journalists Toolbox. Mike, thanks so much for being with us.
It's a pleasure to be here. Happy Monday to everybody.
In case someone doesn't know who you are, and I feel like a lot of people do already know who you are, could you say a little bit about yourself and about the Toolbox?
Oh, sure. I teach at the University of Illinois at Chicago. I teach data and digital journalism there. I'm in my 25th year of full time teaching. Previously worked at the LA Times, Chicago Tribune, and the Washington Post. And when I was at the Post, the Tribune, we founded ChicagoTribune.com back in the day before CMSs. We had to actually code our own web pages. So I take a little bit of old school shoe leather reporting that I had in newspapers from the 80s and 90s and combine it with the new technologies. I like to experiment with my students at UIC, working on a website called redlineproject.news, where we cover news and issues in Chicago neighborhoods. The Journalist Toolbox is in its 30th year. I've updated it half my life. The Toolbox started when I was teaching a news writing class at Northwestern University. It started out as 10 links, a little page called Toolbox. And back in that era, the mid 90s, we didn't really have Canvas or Blackboard or any of the tools we have now. I just built my course syllabi up on Yahoo GeoCities server, which is very old school. Most people put their first web page up there in the 90s. After a while, my students started to contribute more links to it, or, hey, have you tried this? Or I find a new, link or tool from a conference, and I kept adding to it. And over the next 4 years while I was teaching there, the site really grew. And when I got to the Washington Post, I found that reporters had found it, just through web crawlers, and were using it. So that's why I decided to turn it into a full.com, and sold it to the American Press Institute in 2001, late in 2001. They resold it and my services also to SPJ in 2007. SPJ defunded it back in May of 2022, but I own the trademark to the name Journalist Toolbox. So I went and built my own site. They still have, they had to change the name of theirs, and built it with more of an AI slant. I mean, I saw more AI tools coming out, so I built it with more of a forward thinking. It's got dozens of tools and links to resources that are helpful for journalists.
Right.
And I think, we've added a custom GPT, more than 135 training videos, a newsletter that comes out every 2 weeks. So we feel we've got a lot of contact points. I have a textbook called The Journalist Toolbox, a guide to digital and reporting and AI out on Rutledge. So we've got a lot of contact points for journalists to come and learn. The best thing about it, everything's free except for the book. So it's not hitting anybody in the pocketbook. I pay for the server costs of my time through ads on the newsletter and the website, the ads in the Google the training videos, of course, are up on YouTube, as well as donations. I have a lot of people who donate for the newsletter just, out of their own kindness, which is really nice.
That's great. I've got 2 points of connection here with you. One is I ran a Chicago Public Schools blog for a little while that was picked up by the Tribune and licensed by them. So I've got a Tribune and a Chicago connection. And the other point of contact isn't between the two of us personally, but just the other day I was talking to a journalist in the Boston area named Scott Van Voorhis, and he's involved in rebooting something that had a brief demise called Beat the Press, which was a local media panel show. He and the host of that show realized that they missed it. It had been run by the Boston version of WTTW for a long time.
Yeah.
Turned out that they had the IP or the rights to the name, et cetera, and so they've rebooted it as a Zoom show. It's not broadcast anymore, but they have it back. And so I love stories about people finding ways back or reimagining, reanimating things. Congratulations on that.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. And I believe I've met him before. I do a lot of trainings for the New England News and Press Association. And I go to their conference every year. And I believe I've met him before. The name sounded very familiar. It's great.
We're here at the beginning of 2026, and I ask everyone the same question. I'm going to ask you as well. Answer or dodge as you see fit. What's your take on the current state of journalism?
Yeah, as far as the business side of it, it's suffering greatly. I mean, we saw, Pittsburgh Post Gazette, a newsroom I've done trainings for and paper I've read for years, is ceasing publication in May, and that's really hard to hear because I have a feeling some more publications are going to follow.
Right.
I mean, we've had a lot of local, smaller newspapers, go under. We have these large news deserts throughout the U.S. But this is a major metro that has fallen. We haven't had a big one. For instance, Rocky Mountain News, Tampa Tribune. Of course.
What
As
about on the
well.
what about on the quality side? What's your take on the quality of journalism 2026?
Quality of journals, I still think it's there. I get the facts, report them, be accurate, inform, educate, and at times entertain the public. I think that's still there. We just have to have more tools to find that. There's a lot of white noise and AI generated slop, things like that get in the way. And I'm not anti AI, by the way. I do trainings on it. As long as people know how to use it properly, it can be a great tool for journalists.
And
But it's the problem is the people are using it to create the noise.
the problems that journalism faced started long before AI, at least my understanding of them. What's your take? What's your diagnosis for what ails the quality side of journalism? The fact that so few people read the news, the fact that so few people are willing to pay for it or
Yeah, I
consider it.
mean, right. Yeah, you're cutting out a little bit, but I'll give you my 2 cents. I picked up enough of the question. Um, as far as the quality of the news and what I'm seeing every day, I think it depends on where you're going for it. The proliferation of 24/7 news networks who've now gone from reporting the news to too many talking heads and panels, giving their spin on everything. I think that's really hurt journalism. And in some ways, the internet has. I mean, people become very siloed. They're not as open to reading things that might differ from their point of view. The term fake news, has haunted us. And it's not the first time that has happened. I mean, you look through history. Hitler used the term Lügenpresse, lying press, to describe any European paper or U.S. paper that spoke out against his way of thinking. So, this has been around for centuries, even yellow journalism all the way back through time. So,
Are the
it.
are the problems then, as you see them, are the challenges external to the practice of journalism, external circumstances changing, or are there things inside of journalism, inside of the traditional practice that need to be rethought or redone? I'm curious.
Well, we've seen, in essence, a hostile takeover of CBS News by a certain right wing administration. They've moved their people in there. The heavy lawsuits against ABC News, now the BBC and others. I think that's impacting it. Also, we've got newsrooms have downsized. They have to spread people too thin. I was doing a training one time, and a reporter came up to me and said, I'm covering 7 city councils and 5 school boards. And she just can't, she needed help. She needed some tools to help her monitor all these meetings. And I think we've spread people too thin. And again, that goes back to the business practice. Newsrooms have had to downsize so heavily that we don't have enough boots on the ground to get the work done. And that's where J schools come into place. Things like my Red Line project and, sending students out to intern that can help some of that. But it's not nearly enough. Newsrooms are a fraction of the size they were when I was working in them in the 80s, 90s. And even when I was at Arizona PBS back in 2016, 2015, 2016, there have been cutbacks there. So, it's really, that merging of business and also, too, I think training. We have a lot of young journalists that are coming out of school that maybe aren't trained enough in modern technologies, and you put those technologies in the hands of someone that's not experienced with it or doesn't know the content well enough, it can be a very, very bad outcome. We saw that last summer with the Chicago Sun-Times and the Philadelphia Inquirer running that insert from King Syndicate features that included, what to do this summer. It was a summer insert guide into the paper. Half of it was written with AI by a freelancer who didn't fact check anything, and obviously no editors at King Syndicate saw it either. That hits hard on our credibility when those tools are placed in someone's hands without any guardrails.
Right. Maybe it's because I come originally from another field and came to journalism 25 years ago, but I feel like, very few people agree with me on this, so I'm not expecting you to nod. I feel like there are external pressures on journalism and journalism's role or success, and then there's a need to reform or a need to change the traditional practice of journalism. Let's talk about the Toolbox, though, because that's what you're known for. That's why we're here. What are you working mostly with journalism students? Are they most of your or journalism educators? Are they mostly the folks you work with? Are you working with people who are in newsrooms currently? What's the mix of people who find you and ask you to come talk to them or use your services?
Yeah, it's a mix. It's a good question. It's a mix of professional journalists. I do a lot of newsroom trainings. I was in the Google News Initiative training program for a decade. They're on hiatus now since February, but last February. Online News Association, I've done trainings on AI tools for 2 years for them. So I'm getting a lot of professional journalists, but mixed into the lot are educators, progressive educators who want to incorporate new technologies into their classrooms.
Right.
I do some trainings, for universities, faculty themselves. And also, some schools have brought me in. MIT's science journalism program brought me in to do a series of AI trainings this year. I've done trainings for Ohio State,
Right.
all kinds of different universities.
And what has been, I know there are lots of things that you recommend and show people. What's been your most popular or powerful tool? What's the tool that people just light up when you tell them about it and then they go and use it? What's that?
People love the data visualization tools, Flourish, Data Wrapper, RStudio to a certain extent, that's a little more involved. But any data visualization tool is in very high demand. It has been, for about the last 8 or 9 years. But also, show them data scraping, how to scrape data out of a web page. People love that as well. Anything that simplifies their work, that does the heavy lifting. Think of it like I tell people this about AI. Think of it as a crane that can do the heavy lifting for you. So those tend to be the most popular. The AI tools are popular too. I'm getting a lot of requests right now for notebook LM trainings. I'm starting to get some custom GPT trainings. I did that for a small newsroom in Chicago last Friday. So those are the big things right now. Training on social media, that was 10, 15 years ago, but not anymore.
And what's the tool that you think would be helpful that is either too scary or too difficult or seems too difficult? Are there a tool or tools that you wish more people would grab onto that they're not quite ready for yet or that they don't quite know how to do?
Yeah, it's a good question. The large language models still scare a lot of people, but if you show them, how to set up the privacy settings, the custom instructions, how to stop, not stop being a journalist, letting it do all the work for you. We still have to follow what AP calls the 80-20 rule. If AI is doing up to 80% of the work, 20% on the back end at least needs to be us doing, the quality control, editing, and fact checking on the back end. So as long as we follow that model, the large language models can be very useful. They can generate some fantastic graphics. They can analyze very large volumes of data now, Claude in particular, Claude.ai in particular, and some of the new Google tools, Nano Banana for images. You can create some really cool infographics now in Notebook LM, podcasts, videos, slide decks. I just took a bunch of training videos in Google Earth and ran them into Notebook LM, and it created a wonderful little slideshow. I'll probably wind up using some of those slides, not all of them, but a few of them in a future training. So anything that increases your productivity, use it. If not, I say cast it aside.
And what, if anything, is that you said it's fear? What are the obstacles? People who find your website, find your newsletter, find your courses, want to take your courses, obviously they're looking for help.
Yeah.
What gets in the way? How would you describe the fear, the obstacles to change?
Yeah, that's a big challenge in my trainings. It's a great question, something I work on all the time. I think a lot of it is demoing the tool within the context of journalism.
Okay.
You can show somebody how to map butterflies around the world, and journalists aren't going to relate to that. I can't use this, but if you're using it to map, robberies around Chicago, or homicide data, and taking that and turning it into a chart, in practical ways we can use it as journalists, they start to overcome that fear. And then you show them on the back end that you can look at the data set, check it against the chart to make sure it's accurate. They start to become more comfortable with it. And I've seen that. I've been doing a lot of trainings for the Medill Local News Accelerator, run by Mackenzie Warren out of Northwestern. And he's got me working with a lot of small to mid-sized newsrooms throughout the Chicago and parts of Illinois as well. And these very small staffs, they start to realize, my God, we can cover a lot more ground if we're using this tool. A lot of those newsrooms don't have a graphics editor, or they need somebody to help with editing a little bit. And I talk to them about how to work it into their workflow, and when to use it, when not to use it. I show them some failures with it too. Don't use it for this, but try it for this and see if it works for you. I think that soothes that fear a little bit. I had an editor from a paper, a neighborhood paper on the North Shore, emailed me the other day. She goes, "Can we have another training in February?" I go, "Sure." And she goes, "This is really helping our veteran staff overcome the fear of this," and kind of validates what some of the mid-career and younger journalists in the newsroom have been doing with it.
Right.
And that's the solution.
You mentioned examples in context, in the wild, so to speak. Are there outlets or journalists or teams that come to mind when you think about places that have taken Toolbox ideas and really blown them out in real life, in real journalism?
Yeah, it's funny. I write back to newsrooms typically about 3 months after I've done the training, and usually ask them a few questions and things like that. But I always ask for examples. And I've got Google Docs full of Google Earth examples, graphic examples, and many other things that I incorporate into future training. That's really my motivation for asking for it, because then I can show people, hey, here's what WTTW did with this tool to create this.
And
here's how the Chicago Tribune used it.
And if we wanted to see some of the highlights, the examples of newsrooms that have taken Toolbox ideas and used them, is there a place on the site that we would go to?
Yeah, it's called Cool AI Examples. Go there, you'll see a whole collection of them. And also, too, if you take one of my trainings, you'll see, even more than that.
Right.
There'll be charts and graphics and things like that. Yeah.
The grade is focused entirely on the coverage of schools. It's essentially about the education beat, the editors and reporters who are obsessed with covering schools, and oftentimes by educators who are interested in how their world is being covered. Do you work specifically with beats? Do you have advice or toolbox ideas that are particularly appropriate for a beat reporter, education, crime, City Hall, whatever the beat might be?
Yeah. I do a lot of beat specific trainings. Though larger newsrooms often bring me in. We want our entertainment reporters to know how to map things, or our education mapping is big, for education reporters. So I've done a few of those. Just about anything on the Toolbox applies to many of these beats. Now there's some differences. Sports would be interested in certain things as opposed to City Hall beat, or state legislature reporter who's more interested in public records and things like that. But I think the data tools, Google Earth can be useful for school redistricting and things like that. Being able to pull those images, being able to draw on them, being able to measure surfaces on the Earth can be helpful to an education reporter. And just building the basic charts and scraping the data. I use a lot of education data sets in my data scraping trainings just because they're messy and they're often in PDFs and in formats that aren't useful for journalists. I help them pull them and use them and, to basically scrape them and put them in a format that's usable to us.
Right. The best and worst thing about covering school districts, according to me at least, is the weekly, monthly, quarterly school board meeting. This is
Yeah.
the big bear. It's both a great opportunity to see what's going on, what's decisions are being made at the district level. If you can go in person, you can stand in the back and chat with people during parts of the session. But it's also an enormous amount of information, both the presentations, the reports, and then the public comment. What advice would you give a reporter who had to cover, let's say, God forbid, a weekly school board meeting, or maybe they're covering 3 or 4 districts, so they're going. What do you tell them to do in situations like that where they both want to give information, but they also might drown?
I'll go back to that example I used of the reporter in Boston who covers 7 city councils and 5 school boards. What she was telling me was she goes, I have to take my laptop home with me every night and play those meetings because she can't get to all of them. Play those meetings back, those school board meetings back. And she goes, some are 2.5 hours long. It's hard to scrub through them. There are AI tools where you can take that link to that video and it will break down into 5-minute increments, these little summaries of what happened at that point in the meeting. Then you can click on a link right above it. It'll take you to those 5 minutes. I saw her a year later at the conference again. She's like, my God, this has saved my life.
Mm.
There are many tools like that. I've got a couple of them at the top of the toolbox under productivity that will do it. All you have to do is search for YouTube. And that made her life much easier because she was really able to zero in on the 10 or 15 minutes of key things. And those summaries, it's not anything you cut and paste into your story, but it tells you, oh my God, the teachers in the San Francisco Unified School District are upset that they're not getting paid properly and on time. That's something I would probably put on my story. Or, these parents are upset that there's cutbacks at their school for special ed. That's a potential story or something I would put in my meeting. So I'm going to go listen to those 5 minutes. Let AI break those things down to make you more productive and just save you time, kind of give your life back was what that reporter told me. Gave her
how wide? It sounds like this is a wheel that's been invented. How widely have journalists adopted the wheel of these summary productivity tools?
Those that have been trained on them have been lucky enough to go to a conference and been trained, or have a trainer or an editor show them how to do it. They're going to wind up using it. The problem is not enough exposure. I mean, there's a lot of, one of the reasons I made the toolbox was to save reporters time in finding these tools, learning how to use them. All my training videos run 5 to 15 minutes long. So as you're waiting for a callback, you can sit and play those videos. And you get a nice little overview of how to use it. Usually there's an exercise built into it. Reporters don't have any time. I was a reporter for 15 years. I know that. So I tried to take the 2,000 new AI tools coming out every month and pare it down into the 100 or so that we would care about and spread it throughout the site. And it's grown over time. There's a lot there. But the videos, the newsletters help really kind of hone in on what's really important right now.
So what would your guess be? 5% adoption, 25%, 50% adoption of AI productivity tools for things like school board meetings?
Yeah, I would say 100% because people have been using AI every time they use AI or do a Google search. So they're using AI in some way and don't even know it.
But for summarization, for turning the fire hose of information into something that they can.
Yeah, unless there was a wide survey that can't be answered. Yeah.
There are a lot of journalism support organizations out there, outlets, associations, endeavors. And I'm curious, what advice or what experience have you had, or what advice would you give to journalists about Neiman, Poynter, CJR, et cetera? In education, there's Education Writers Association. I'm not expecting you to know them in particular, but it can be overwhelming. The journalism support can be overwhelming. How do you, where do you focus most of your efforts, and how do you help people figure out where to focus their learning?
I, I always encourage people to look for things that are free trainings that are done for journalists by journalists. I think that helps narrow it down. Think programs like ONA that had the monthly training programs. I did a training program with them with the Joyce Foundation for a little over a year, where we concentrated on upper Midwest states, Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois. And we got into those newsrooms and really did some hands-on work. But if you see free training out there, take it. Also look at their websites. Oftentimes they archive those videos and put them up there. You can always get caught up pretty quickly on something. Subscribe to the newsletters. I got a whole list of AI newsletters that pertain to journalism. Wonder Tools that Jeremy Kaplan does. A lot of Wonder Tools for reporters, what Samantha Sunny's done. They pare down and save you a lot of time, as mine as well. Pare down, and focus on what's important, not just with AI tools, but what's going on in the industry too. It's important to know, if there's something going on in the New York Times versus Chat GPT, a Microsoft lawsuit. So I think if they focus on those key areas, it will save them a lot of time. People tend to gravitate toward journalism organizations of interest, RTDNA for broadcast and digital, EWA for education writers, so they're going to gravitate toward those organizations regardless. But the question they have to ask themselves, are they doing any training for us? And there's grant money out there. They just need to go out and apply for it.
Right.
And they get operational expenses covered for it, but also money to pay the trainers because
Right.
our training work isn't free. I mean, I've had some people invite me at the last minute to go to Washington, D.C., pay them $400 to attend their conference and do a whole day's worth of free training for it. And I tell them what my fee is, and they about fall off their chair. But the money's out there. And there's international organizations too, a Global
Right.
Investigative Journalism Network, that, if you want to turn your beat into more of an investigative slant, GIJNIRE, go to the NICAR conference and start picking up these skills.
You mentioned EWA, as did I. Have you worked with them in the past? Is there a EWA webinar featuring Mike Reilley in the Toolbox that I somehow missed?
Never worked with them.
The thing that I worry about in terms of my own use of AI is the accuracy issue. A couple of years ago, someone said, "Oh, there's a site that will turn your boring articles into an exciting dialogue between two journalists, sort of like a Radiolab style, if you know the Radiolab show." I put one of my columns into this was Notebook, probably two and a half years ago. I put it into Notebook. Sure enough, it made a very exciting conversation, one curious person, one sort of explaining person. And I was very excited about it. The AI even came up with a comparison that I hadn't thought of in the piece. It added a useful comparison. Great. And then it started going off of the content. And I thought, this is fun in terms of being a toy and illustrating something that could be great, but it's not great yet. What's your take on people like me who tried tools 2 or 3 years ago and have shunned them since?
Yeah, your experience, I actually worked these into the trainings. Your experience with AI today isn't what it's going to be tomorrow or the next year. The next day, it's constantly improving. It's learning 24/7, 365. When we're out at the bar tonight having a beer, watching the ball game, it's learning how to make better images, video, and audio. Mm-hmm. So oftentimes I'll come back to tools. I often, with the large language models, especially when I'm teaching a class or a training, spread them out over one browser, and I have it do a task, edit something, or do something, merge something together, convert something, and see which tool does the best job. Mm-hmm. Claude's very good at copy editing. Gemini has caught up to a little bit to it lately. So over the last 4 years, these tools have grown and changed in different ways. They're learning, much like us, learning and growing in new ways. I might come back to a tool and give it a second chance, especially if I've read something about it, that they've made some changes with it, or if I specifically need it to do that skill, I'll come back to it. Give it a second chance. But that's the importance of that 80-20 rule. The minute you heard something wrong with that podcast, is mispronunciating something or went off on a tangent outside of the scope of your document, that's when you're like, oh, I'm going to move on and not use this.
And has the, generally speaking, as of today, has the what's called the hallucination problem, or what I call the hallucination problem, that is the fabrication of things that are not in the content that has been given, has that been solved? Is that close to being solved, or is that never going to be solved?
There are various studies on it. There's always going to be a margin for error, just like with human beings. There's always a margin for error. A lot of the mistakes, I don't call them hallucinations, more or less mistakes, often come from the prompt, because something we've written or we've asked it to do something it hasn't been trained to do. We've asked it to do too much. And that's one of the things I do. I still do a lot of prompt writing training with journalists to help them avoid those types of situations. Go to more of a step-by-step process. Ask it to do this, then this, then this, then this. Helps solve a lot of that. Also, with your custom instructions, you can tell it, give it negative prompts. And I wouldn't overdo it, but one or two here or there, stay off Wikipedia if you're helping me find resources. Like I use Perplexity a lot to go and find, research. And basically all it's doing is pulling in links. That's acting more as a search engine for me. But I'm not asking it to write that research or summarize it for me or anything like that. I'm still pulling it out of there and putting it together myself.
One last question. This has been so interesting and so helpful, and I hope a lot of people find you and your work through this conversation.
Good.
Is there a working journalist out there, presently or recently? Is there someone out there who sort of embodies the Toolbox journalist? That is, someone who's still reporting or editing or producing, but a person who really seems to be leading the way, who we could all aspire to be, or who we could watch closely, who's out there at the
there's
Washington Post or the
thousands of them. I couldn't just pick one. I mean, I did trainings for years for Gannett, but there are a lot of publications that you can see it in their work, particularly with the data work and things like that. You can see what they're doing. AI doesn't always show up because a lot of it's kind of behind.
There's no one out there who's known as.
I can't just name one person for you. Yeah, don't worry about that.
Tell me what you're doing next in the early part of 2026. Are you doing a webinar or a panel, or do you have something new coming out that folks could look for?
Yeah, I'll have the second edition of Data Plus Journalism coming out. I co-authored that book with Samantha Sunny. We're actually sending it off Wednesday to the publisher, Routledge. So the second edition of that book will be out. The first edition was in 2021. This one will have a lot more with AI. A little bit more with coding. Our studio is still very prominent in that book. But we come at it from a story-driven perspective of not just, here's a new tool to play around with and do something cool with and create this visualization, but how do you write with data, basic math for journalists? How do we share it and be transparent in our work, provide the data set to the reader? And we I've probably interviewed a dozen journalists for that book. And, we went through and we updated it and rewrote pretty heavily in some areas, because so much has changed in 4 years. So that book will be hitting the market next summer. I assume my Journalist Toolbox textbook, second edition, will be coming after that, probably sometime in 2020, late 2027, probably December of 2027.
Excellent. Mike Reilley, Journalist Toolbox, thanks so much for being on the show.
You bet. Thanks for having me, Alexander. Take care.